He stole my heart. After taking my pack, a werewolf romance audiobook, the wind tore through the pines like a predator hunting its prey, rattling the cabin windows and carrying a chill that made my skin prickle. I pressed my hands against the worn wood of the porch, trying to steady my breathing. The forest was alive tonight, alive with something I couldn't yet name, something dangerous and electric. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave, not when everything I had left depended on what I would do tonight. A scream split the night, sharp and urgent, slicing through the roar of the storm. My heart lurched. I had been alone in these woods for weeks, hiding from the chaos that had destroyed my life, from the people who had once promised safety but left betrayal in their wake. My pack, gone, taken, and I was the only one left. Without thinking, I ran toward the sound, my boots sinking into mud, branches clawing at my coat. Rain pelted my face, stinging my eyes, and yet I didn't slow. The scream came again, closer this time, human but raw with pain. My throat tightened, then I saw him. He was crouched over someone or something, half hidden by the shadows of the trees. A dark figure, tall and broad, every movement controlled yet unnervingly fluid. His hair was wild, his eyes glinting gold even in the storm. And when he turned toward me, I felt the air shift, as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low and commanding, but not unkind. It carried a weight, a warning. I heard someone screaming. I managed, though my voice sounded small against the storm. He studied me, tilting his head as though deciding whether I was a threat or prey. Then his gaze fell back to the figure beneath him, a wolf or something that had once been human. My stomach churned, but before I could think, the shape moved, shifting with impossible speed, and I realized it wasn't a wolf at all. It was the remains of my pack's leader, my father's closest ally, lying lifeless in the mud. The air thickened with tension, the kind that makes your chest ache. My eyes met his again, and for a heartbeat, I wanted to hate him, to blame him for the emptiness now spreading through my veins. But something in that gaze stopped me, something primal and unsettling. You should leave, he repeated, firmer. This time, now. I shook my head, defiance rising despite the fear. I can't. I need to know what happened, he sighed, almost like a predator humoring its prey. Then, almost impossibly fast, he was gone, vanishing into the shadows of the trees. My heart slammed against my ribs, panic rising. Part of me knew I should run, hide, survive, but another part, deeper and more foolish, wanted to follow. I did. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I moved as if the forest itself guided me, drawing me toward the figure who had appeared from nowhere. And then I saw it, the transformation. Before my eyes, his body seemed to stretch, elongate, muscles shifting beneath skin that gleamed wet with rain. Golden eyes, sharper than any human's, blazed, and fur erupted over his form. A wolf? No, a hybrid, something in between, something impossible. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. And then he stopped, standing over me, taller than any wolf, more terrifying and beautiful than anything I had ever seen. You shouldn't have followed, he said, voice a rumble that vibrated through the earth. And yet, there was something in it, something that made my chest ache in a way I didn't understand. This world, it's not safe for you. Not anymore. I wanted to argue, to tell him I was already broken, already lost, that nothing could make this worse. But before I could, he vanished again, leaving only the scent of wet pine and something darker, something undeniably alive, lingering in the air. I sank to my knees, hands pressed to my heart, trying to make sense of the impossible. Wolves, packs, the storm, the blood in the mud. Everything was a warning, and yet a pull inside me refused to let go. My world had shattered, and somehow, in the chaos, he had appeared like a shadow in the night, like a promise I wasn't ready to understand. The storm continued its relentless assault, but the forest felt different now, dangerous, secretive, alive in ways I had never known. And I knew, deep down, that meeting him was only the beginning. My life, whatever remained of it, had already changed. Somewhere in the shadows, he watched. Somewhere in the rain-soaked trees, he waited. And I, foolish and reckless, would find him again, because in a world of predators, I felt the strange certainty that he wasn't just another threat. He was something else entirely, something that could destroy me or save me. And as the wind howled and the night closed around me, I realized that I was no longer just a survivor. I was prey. And maybe, just maybe, I was something more. The forest had quieted, though the storms. Aftershocks lingered in the soft drizzle that slicked the leaves and soaked my hair to my face. Rain dripped in steady, uneven rhythms from the branches above, forming tiny rivulets that splashed into the mud below. The world smelled of wet pine and earth, sharp and raw, and in that scent, I could feel the echo of everything I had lost. My father's ally, the one I had thought invincible, lay somewhere in the mud, and his absence gnawed at the edges of my mind. Each heartbeat felt heavy with guilt, grief, and a simmering dread I couldn't shake. But there was something else, something more urgent, that pulled at me. An impossible memory burned into my mind. Him, the stranger with golden eyes who had appeared from nowhere, half human, half wolf, a predator and a guardian intertwined. I forced myself to move cautiously, the sodden leaves crunching underfoot. My senses were on high alert. Every rustle of a branch, every flicker of movement made my skin prickle. Part of me wanted to run, wanted to retreat into the shadows and hide, but another part, a more foolish, stubborn part, urged me forward. The pull toward him was magnetic, primal. It was the kind of pull I had never experienced, the kind that threatened to undo everything I thought I knew about myself. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely rising above the soft drumming of the rain. I knew he couldn't answer, not in the ordinary sense, and yet I spoke as if the forest itself might deliver the reply. From the misted shadows, a figure emerged. He didn't announce himself, didn't make a sound. He simply appeared, his form sharp and impossible, silhouetted against the gray drizzle. Golden eyes caught mine immediately, luminous and unblinking, piercing through the curtain of rain and shadow. My chest tightened at the sight of him, a mixture of fear, awe, and something I couldn't yet name. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice low, calm, and edged with authority. The words carried a weight that pressed against my ribs, commanding attention, demanding obedience. I heard screaming, I admitted, shivering from the cold, my voice trembling despite my attempt at control. I had to see. I had to. No. He tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that made me feel as if every thought I had, every secret I carried, were visible to him. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said, almost a warning, though it sounded closer to a murmur than a threat. "And yet," I whispered, my heart tightening, "you followed me anyway." A shadow of a smile ghosted across his lips, or at least, I thought I saw it. Then he shook his head, almost imperceptibly, as if he found the notion of humor too human to indulge. "Some things are worth the risk," he said finally. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Why help me?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my attempts at composure. I wanted to believe he was here to protect me, but instinct screamed at me that this was not so simple. Nothing about him was simple. He took a step closer, and the space between us seemed to vibrate with energy, a tension I could almost taste on my tongue. The drizzle fell around us in a soft curtain, and I caught the scent of him, wild, earthy, intoxicating, and my breath caught. "You're human," he said softly, as though speaking to himself, "but you're not like the others. You sense things they ignore." I frowned, unsure whether to feel insulted or intrigued. "What do you mean?" "You notice currents," he said, voice low, measured, "the undercurrents of danger, the subtle shifts the world tries to hide. That's why you're still alive, wandering these woods while most would have already fled or broken." I glanced at him, startled. "Alive? Yes, but barely." My voice shook as I admitted it, words trembling against the storm. "I've been running for weeks, hiding from people I thought I could trust. My pack, they're gone." He flinched, ever so slightly, the golden glow in his eyes dimming with something I couldn't name. Pity? Regret? Guilt? I wanted to ask, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I pressed on, my curiosity a stubborn flame. "And you? Who are you really?" He didn't answer at once. His gaze swept the forest, alert and calculating, muscles taut beneath the wet fabric of his coat. For a heartbeat, I thought he might vanish again, disappearing into the mist like a phantom. Then he exhaled, long and deliberate. "I am someone who should remain unseen," he said finally, "but tonight, I could not." The words struck me with an odd familiarity, as if he were confessing something I had always known but could never name. I shivered, not just from the rain but from the electric current of his presence. "You could have left me," I whispered, though the words were almost irrelevant. You didn't have to stay. I stayed, he admitted, voice low, almost hesitant, because some things, some people, are worth protecting, even when the cost is high. Cost. The word lingered in the damp air between us. I wanted to ask him what cost he meant, what price he had already paid, but the forest seemed to tighten around us, pressing us together in silence. Suddenly, he moved again, just a step closer, and I felt the tension spike, coiling in my chest. Like a living thing. Walk with me, he said, and I noticed how natural, how effortless it sounded, though every instinct in me screamed to resist. If you want answers, you have to follow me. No more hesitation. The path into the forest loomed ahead, narrow and tangled, shrouded in mist and shadow. I hesitated for a heartbeat, wondering if I was about to step into danger or something far stranger. Then, reckless and determined, I took his hand. It was warm, steady, almost grounding, and a shiver ran through me at the contact. For long minutes, we walked in silence, the only sounds the wet thump of our boots in the mud and the occasional splash of a puddle. The tension was unbearable, yet oddly comforting. It was as if the forest itself had paused, holding its breath while we moved between light and shadow, predator and prey, human and something else entirely. Then, without warning, he stopped and turned toward me. His golden eyes softened for a fraction of a second, revealing a vulnerability I had not expected. You shouldn't trust me, he said quietly. Not yet. But if you survive tonight, maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why I stayed, why I couldn't leave you to face this alone. I searched his face, trying to decipher the storm behind those eyes, the predator, the protector, the impossible creature that stood before me. Despite my fear, despite the uncertainty, a spark of hope flared inside me. Perhaps he wasn't just another shadow in my broken world. Perhaps he was something more, something dangerous and terrifying, and yet, something I couldn't ignore. As the drizzle fell around us, soft and relentless, I realized that the night was far from over. And, in the spaces between his words, in the charged silence of the forest, I knew my life had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer simply surviving. I was beginning a journey I couldn't yet comprehend, into shadows between worlds, into the depths of something that might destroy me or save me, and somewhere in the misted trees, I sensed him watching, waiting. A presence that was more than human, more than beast, and yet, in a way I couldn't name, entirely necessary. The mist hung low in the forest, wrapping around the trees like a living shroud. My boots sank into the damp earth with every step, leaving shallow impressions that the rain began to erase almost immediately. The stranger, my impossible, golden-eyed shadow, moved ahead with a predator's grace, effortlessly navigating the uneven terrain. I followed, hesitant yet compelled, my heart thrumming with a mix of fear, awe, and a strange, unexplainable longing. I wanted to ask him questions, endless ones. Who or what he was, why my pack had been taken, what kind of creature he truly was. But every time I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat. Something about him, something in the steady power of his presence, demanded silence. I had no choice but to follow, to observe, to let the forest itself reveal the answers in its own time. Do you always wander alone? His voice, low and smooth, startled me. He hadn't turned, yet I felt it directed at me, as if he could read my thoughts through the tension in my movements. I have to, I admitted, shivering from cold and nerves. There's no one left. A shadow flickered across his face, brief and unreadable, before he glanced at me. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have survived this long. There was no accusation in his tone, just a weight, a gravity that settled over me like a cloak. And yet, here you are. I swallowed, forcing words through the lump in my throat. And yet, I am. Isn't that what survival is? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped by a small clearing, letting me catch up. Moonlight filtered through the thinning clouds, glinting off wet leaves and casting silver patterns across the mossy ground. He crouched slightly, as if preparing for some unseen danger. I realized then that he was constantly alert, every muscle taut, eyes scanning the shadows beyond our own. You're careful, I said softly, almost in awe. You notice everything. That's how I stay alive, he replied, voice low, almost a growl under the rain's rhythm. Then, his gaze locked on mine, piercing, searching. And you sense it too. That's why you're still walking beside me, rather than hiding in some forgotten corner. I didn't know how to respond. Every instinct screamed to keep my distance, yet every fiber of me wanted to lean closer, to unravel the enigma that was him. I don't understand, I admitted. Why me? Why here? He exhaled slowly, the sound mingling with the whisper of the wind through the trees. Because fate is cruel but precise, he said, almost cryptically. Some things cannot be ignored, even when they're hidden in plain sight. You were meant to see this, to be part of it, whether you like it or not. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Part of me wanted to scream, demanded explanations, demanded clarity. Yet another part, a smaller, more reckless part, was exhilarated. It was terrifying to feel so exposed, yet alive in a way I hadn't known I could be. He rose smoothly, tall and imposing, and turned toward the deeper shadows of the forest. Follow me, he said, and the edge in his tone left no room for argument. I did. We moved silently, the forest closing in around us, thick with the scent of wet earth, moss, and something more primal, something I couldn't name, yet recognized deep in my chest. Every rustle of the trees, every distant owl's call, every shift of the fog felt amplified. I could feel the pulse of life around us, and somehow, I knew we were not alone. After a few tense minutes, he stopped at the edge of a small creek. Water flowed swiftly, shimmering under the weak moonlight. He crouched again, placing a hand on the moss-covered stone. For a moment, he was silent, listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he looked at me, eyes reflecting the silvered light. The world is not what it seems, he said, almost gently. Most humans walk blind through it, unaware of the currents beneath. You can see them, and that's dangerous. I shivered. Dangerous how? He hesitated, then knelt fully beside the water, fingers skimming the surface. Ripples spread, reflecting fractured fragments of the moonlight. There are those who hunt what they cannot control, he said quietly. Those who will stop at nothing to take what is theirs, or destroy it entirely. You have already survived because you were never meant to face this world unprotected. But protection has its limits. I glanced at him, trying to decipher the shadows in his expression. And you? Are you protecting me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rose, standing so close that the mist curled around us like a living veil. For now, he said finally, but the world we walk is unforgiving. Curiosity is a dangerous companion, and yours has carried you far beyond safety. I swallowed hard, the enormity of his words settling over me like frost. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange thrill surged. I had no idea what he was or what I was becoming, but I couldn't deny the pull between us, magnetic and undeniable. Something primal, something eternal, seemed to hum in the space between us, vibrating in rhythm with my heartbeat. Suddenly, movement flickered in the shadows. I froze. He tensed, a growl rumbling low in his chest. Stay close, he warned. And before I could question, he was gone in a blur, shifting between human and wolf form with impossible speed. My eyes widened as I caught glimpses of golden fur and elongated limbs before he returned to me, breathless but composed, the storm and forest bending around his presence. You see, he said, calm again, though his chest heaved slightly. Even here, even now, danger follows. I realized then that I had crossed into a world I barely understood, where the line between predator and protector, human and something else, was blurred and shifting. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I felt an undeniable certainty. I couldn't turn back. Not now. The forest whispered around us, carrying the secrets of hidden moons, unseen eyes, and ancient currents. And in that haunting, silvery glow, I understood something I hadn't admitted even to myself. The stranger with golden eyes was no longer just a figure in the shadows. He was the beginning of a journey I could not escape, a path I had no choice but to follow. Wherever it might lead, the forest seemed to shift around me, the mist thickening, so that each tree loomed like a silent sentinel, watching, waiting. The stranger, my impossible golden-eyed shadow, moved ahead, silent as a whisper, every step precise, as though he belonged to this world in ways I never could. My boots sank into the soggy earth with each hesitant step, but I didn't falter. The pull toward him was irresistible, a thread that wound around my chest tighter with every heartbeat. You're not like the others, he murmured, glancing back at me briefly. His golden eyes glimmered in the dim light, sharp, predatory, and yet impossibly tender. Most humans would have fled long before now. I can't, I admitted, voice trembling. I can't run anymore, not after losing everything. My fingers dug into the damp moss at my sides, grounding me as memories clawed their way to the surface. The screams, the blood, the hollowed faces of my pack, my father's face. My heart ached so sharply it made my knees weak. He stopped suddenly, the tension in his stance snapping me out of my thoughts. "You're carrying more than grief," he said softly, "and it shows. Pain makes you dangerous, but also visible. That's why you've survived this far. But the forest is not safe." I studied him, trying to read the layers behind those impossible golden eyes. "Why are you helping me? You don't owe me anything," he exhaled, and the sound was almost a growl, low and dangerous, yet laced with something I couldn't name. "Regret, maybe, or desire." "I don't," he said, "but some things, some people, are worth breaking rules for." Rules. That word lingered, and I shivered, sensing its gravity. I wanted to ask him what rules, what world, but I feared the answers would be more terrifying than the silence of the forest. We moved deeper into the woods, the trees forming a natural cathedral around us. Shadows danced with the weak moonlight, and every sound, the drip of water, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl felt amplified, meaningful. I couldn't tell where the natural world ended and the strange currents around him began. "I sense it," I whispered, almost to myself. "Something beneath all this. Something alive watching." His gaze snapped to mine, sharp and alert. "Good," he said quietly. "You're not blind. That's rare among humans. Most of them walk through life unable to see the danger, the truth beneath appearances. You feel it." I swallowed, the air thick with tension and something else a pulse in my chest I could not explain. "Then, what am I seeing? What is all this?" He hesitated, the mask of predator and stranger slipping for a heartbeat. "What you see is only the surface," he said. "Beneath it, the currents run deep. There are beings who guard their own, and there are those who would kill to control what they cannot. Tonight, you have glimpsed the edges of that world." My breath caught. "And you? Are you one of them?" A shadow passed over his features. For a moment, the human and the wolf seemed to merge into one, and I understood what he meant. "I am something you cannot yet name," he said quietly, almost like a confession. "And yet, in this world, even I am bound by rules. Some that I must follow, others I choose to bend." The forest grew darker as we moved forward, the mist curling around us like fingers. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy with tension, thick with the sense that unseen eyes followed our every step. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet unexplainably alive. "You shouldn't trust me," he murmured, his gaze locking onto mine. "Not fully. I am not your protector, not entirely. And yet, I will not let harm touch you tonight, or while I can prevent it." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't understand, that the world had already destroyed me once and that I wasn't sure I could survive another loss. But the words wouldn't come. The pull between us, the magnetic tension, the dangerous closeness made my heart pound so violently it felt like it might break free. Then, movement flickered in the shadows. A whisper of something faster, darker, predatory. He shifted immediately, and for the first time, I saw him fully not human, not fully wolf, but a blend of both. Golden fur, elongated limbs, eyes blazing with intensity. And yet, when he returned to me, he was calm again, almost impossibly so, like he had bridged worlds and walked them both without fear. "You see?" he asked quietly, returning to his human form, chest heaving slightly, the wild energy still in his stance. "This world is dangerous, and curiosity. It will get you killed if you are not careful." I shivered, not entirely from cold. "Then why bring me here?" "Because you have already stepped into it," he said, voice soft but commanding. "And some truths cannot be unseen. Some bonds cannot be ignored. You are now a part of this world, whether you accept it or not." The words hit me like a punch, and yet, a thrill ran through me. Fear and fascination tangled inside me like the twisted roots beneath our feet. I knew he was dangerous, impossible, unpredictable, and yet vital. And I realized, with a mixture of terror and longing, that I could not turn back. Not from him, not from the currents he had pulled me into. And as the mist thickened and the shadows lengthened, I understood the truth I had been trying to deny. I had stepped into a world of predators, secrets, and impossible bonds. And somehow, in the center of it all, he was waiting for me, golden eyes reflecting the hidden moon, watching, waiting, and pulling me closer to a fate I could neither escape nor fully comprehend. The forest seemed to tighten around us, branches arching overhead like skeletal fingers, their shadows stretching across the uneven path. Every sound, the trickle of a distant stream, the whisper of wind through pine needles, the occasional crack of a twig felt amplified, as if the woods themselves were alive and aware of our presence. I could feel it. Now, a pulse under the earth, subtle but insistent, a rhythm that matched the beating of my own heart. He moved ahead of me again, golden eyes piercing the mist, muscles taut and controlled with the precision of a predator. Each step he took seemed deliberate, purposeful, yet I could sense a tension beneath the surface, as if the forest itself had become a trap, and he was acutely aware of every danger we might face. "Do you always walk like this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I forced it to carry over the rustling leaves. He glanced back, lips curving into a brief, almost imperceptible smirk. "Like what?" "Like you expect the world to attack at any moment," I admitted. My fingers grazed the bark of a tree for support, my eyes darting nervously around. "You're alert, too alert, and it makes me uneasy." His expression softened, though only slightly. "Uneasy keeps you alive," he said. "Fear sharpens senses. Curiosity without caution gets humans killed." I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. I'm already scared, but curiosity is all I have left. Without it, I wouldn't even be here. A flicker of something passed across his features, recognition, perhaps, or a hint of respect. He slowed, falling into step beside me, his presence close enough that the heat from his body seeped through the damp fabric of my coat. "Curiosity can be both a gift and a curse," he said, his voice low, almost a growl beneath the mist. "And you walk the line more tightly than most. That's why you survive." I tried to focus on the rhythm of our steps, the cold bite of the mist on my skin, the scent of wet earth that clung to everything. But there was something magnetic in the way he moved, the way his gaze lingered on me, sharp and golden, assessing and unreadable. It made my pulse spike in ways I hadn't anticipated, and the forest around us seemed to blur, fading into the periphery of my awareness. Then, without warning, he stopped. I nearly collided with him, and my breath caught in my chest. He crouched, slightly, ears forward, eyes darting into the shadows beyond the mist. "Something's close," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Not human, not entirely, but alive." My stomach twisted. "Alive?" I whispered, barely daring to breathe. He turned to me, expression sharp and commanding. "You need to stay close. Whatever this is, it's patient, and it's hunting." I felt a surge of panic but forced myself to steady my breathing. I couldn't run. Not yet. Not with him here, watching, guiding, protecting. And yet, the terror in my chest was raw, unrelenting. The next minutes passed in tense silence, each step deliberate, each sound magnified. The mist thickened, curling around us, obscuring the path and the trees beyond. Then I saw it, a shadow, moving with unnatural speed between the trunks, just at the edge of my vision. I froze, my instincts screaming at me to flee, but his presence rooted me to the spot. "Do you see it?" he whispered, his voice tight with caution. I nodded, unable to speak. My pulse thundered in my ears as the shadow slipped closer, silent and deliberate. He shifted slightly, body coiling, golden eyes blazing as he read the movement in the darkness. "It's testing us," he murmured, "waiting for a mistake. And we cannot make one." The tension was unbearable, the forest around us alive with unseen predators and silent threats. My hands shook as I gripped the mossy trunk of a nearby tree. "Why now?" I asked softly. "Why me?" His gaze softened briefly, the predator mask slipping for a moment. "Because you are here. Because you survived when others would have fallen. Because fate has a way of bringing the unprepared to the edge of danger and then seeing who survives." I didn't know what to say. My chest ached with fear, longing, and something else, something that twisted inside me every time his golden eyes met mine. I wanted answers, wanted clarity, wanted the impossible bond between us to make sense. And yet, I feared that understanding would only bring more pain. Then he moved again, faster than I could follow, shifting in a blur of motion. I caught glimpses of his elongated limbs, the gleam of golden fur, the way he became something inhuman, and my stomach clenched with awe and terror. He returned moments later, human again, calm but tense, as if he had bridged a divide I could not yet comprehend. They watch, he said simply, his voice low. And they know you are here. That makes you dangerous to them. And dangerous to yourself. I shivered, not entirely from the cold. Then what am I supposed to do? Survive, he said, his gaze sharp and unyielding. Trust no one. Observe everything. And follow me. We continued deeper into the forest, the mist wrapping around us, the shadows pressing closer, the whispers of danger threading through every breath of wind. I realized, with a mix of fear and fascination, that I was no longer just a human wandering a strange forest. I was part of something larger, something alive, something impossible, and at the center of it all impossible, golden-eyed and utterly magnetic, he was my guide, my predator, my protector, and perhaps something I could never name. The forest was quieter than it had ever been. The wind, usually whistling through the trees, had stilled as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The pale light of the half-moon filtered through the tangled canopy above, casting ghostly shadows across the damp ground. Every crackle of fallen leaves beneath my boots sounded far too loud, and every distant howl carried a meaning I didn't understand yet. My heart pounded harder with each step as I followed the faint trail deeper into the woods, clutching the small dagger I'd found in my father's chest, though I knew it would be useless if what I suspected was true. Somewhere behind me, branches rustled softly, too softly to be the wind. I froze. Elias, I whispered, my breath barely audible in the still night. He was there, leaning against a tree like he'd been waiting all along, his silhouette outlined by the moon's silver glow. His dark shirt clung to his chest, damp with sweat, his tousled black hair glimmering faintly where the light touched it. His expression was unreadable, the perfect mask of control, but his eyes, those wild amber eyes, burned brighter than ever. You shouldn't have followed me, he said, voice low, husky, and edged with something primal. I swallowed, forcing myself to take a step closer, even though instinct screamed at me to run. You've been hiding something from me. For days, weeks maybe. You owe me the truth, Elias. His jaw clenched, muscles tightening beneath his skin as though fighting an invisible restraint. He didn't answer, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. He just stood there, radiating a strange kind of danger I couldn't name. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until finally he turned, motioning me to follow. Come, he said, his tone softer now, but layered with tension. If you want answers, you'll get them. But after this, you'll never see the world the same way again. I hesitated, glancing back at the distant glow of the cabin lights where safety waited, or at least, ignorance did. But something deep inside me, something instinctual, pushed me forward. My feet moved before my thoughts could catch up. Elias led me deeper into the woods, his steps soundless despite the thick underbrush. Every so often, he would glance over his shoulder at me, as if measuring whether I was ready for what was coming. Then we reached it, a clearing circular, unnaturally perfect, as though carved out by some ancient force. In the center stood a massive stone altar, cracked and weathered with age, etched with symbols I couldn't read but somehow felt. The air here was different, heavier, as if carrying whispers from another world. This place, I murmured, stepping closer, drawn by something I didn't understand. What is it? Elias stood beside me now, his presence impossibly solid and grounding, and yet his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. This is where it all began, he said. The blood oath, the binding, the curse. I turned to him, confusion sharp in my chest. What curse? His hand curled into a fist at his side. The one that ties me to them, he said, his tone raw with something like hatred. The one that makes me what I am. I stared at him, every breath shallow, my thoughts splintering apart. I didn't know what I expected him to say, but when his eyes met mine, glowing faintly in the moonlight, the truth crashed down on me. Before he even spoke it, "You're not human," I whispered. The silence that followed wasn't denial. It was confirmation. Elias finally stepped forward, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His voice was barely above a murmur, but it carried the weight of centuries. I was born into a bloodline cursed by the moon, he said. We were bound to the beast inside us before we even drew our first breath. We are shifters, Lyra. Wolves that walk as men when we choose and monsters when we can't. My chest tightened, my grip on the dagger loosening until it slipped from my fingers, hitting the ground with a soft thud. It was impossible, unreal, and yet, standing there, looking into his luminous eyes, I couldn't deny what I felt in my bones, that he was telling the truth. You, my voice broke, but I forced the words out. You killed my father, didn't you? The question shattered something between us. Elias flinched as if I'd struck him, his head lowering, his breath ragged. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, he said finally, his voice thick with restrained emotion. I tried to stop it, Lyra. I tried to fight it. But he trailed off, swallowing hard, and when he looked at me again, there was something unguarded, raw, and broken in his gaze. The wind finally stirred, carrying the distant howl of another wolf, closer this time. Elias tensed immediately, his body coiling like a predator ready to strike. They've found us, he said sharply. Who? My pack, he said, his voice low and edged with danger. And they'll kill you if they see you with me. Before I could protest, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me behind the altar, pressing me against the cold stone as footsteps and snapping twigs echoed faintly through the trees. I could hear them, several of them, moving fast, closing in. Elias leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. Don't move, don't breathe, whatever happens, stay silent. And then he was gone, melting into the shadows with inhuman speed, his form blurring at the edges beneath the moon's pale light. I crouched low, my heart hammering against my ribs as shapes emerged at the edge of the clearing, tall, broad-shouldered men, their movements unnaturally fluid, their eyes glimmering faintly even in the darkness. They sniffed the air, scanning for something for me, and though I couldn't see him anymore, I could feel Elias out there, circling them, a predator among predators. The silence before the storm stretched unbearably, until the first growl broke through, low, feral, and filled with promise. Something was about to happen, something I wasn't ready for, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, the first real glimpse into Elias's world. The world where monsters walked as men, the world I was now trapped in, whether I wanted to be or not. The forest was alive with the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves swaying under the breath of the midnight wind. A full moon hung high above, bathing the woods in silver light, turning every shadow into a secret and every silence into a whisper. The air was thick with mystery, carrying scents I couldn't decipher: earth, pine, and something else. Something wild. I followed the narrow trail, clutching my jacket closer as I tried to calm my restless thoughts. It had been hours since the confrontation with the rogue shifters, and though we were safe now, my heart hadn't stopped pounding. Slow down, Ava, came Kieran's low, rough voice behind me. You'll get yourself lost out here. I turned, startled to see him leaning casually against a tree, his tall, broad frame soaking in the moonlight like it belonged to him. His dark hair fell over his forehead, and his piercing gray eyes caught mine, holding me in place. He looked impossibly composed, as though the chaos of earlier hadn't touched him at all. But there was something different tonight. He wasn't hiding his wolf, even from here. I could feel the energy radiating off him, raw, untamed, magnetic. The tether between us, the strange bond neither of us had named, pulsed like a living thing beneath my skin. You shouldn't sneak up on people like that, I muttered, forcing my voice to sound steady, though I could barely breathe. His lips curved in the faintest smirk. If you think I was sneaking, you haven't seen me try. I hated the way my cheeks heated, hated the way my pulse betrayed me. But more than that, I hated the secrets he still kept from me. What do you want, Kieran? I asked softly. His smirk faded, and for a moment, he just looked at me, really looked at me. It was unsettling, the way his gaze seemed to strip away my defenses, pulling out pieces of me I didn't even know I'd hidden. You're angry, he said finally. Angry because I didn't tell you what I am, what this is. I swallowed hard, glancing away. Can you blame me? You keep pulling me into your world without warning, without answers, without a choice. He stepped closer, silent but sure, his boots crunching softly against the forest floor. The closer he came, the heavier the air felt, as though the night itself held its breath. You've had a choice, Ava, he said, his voice low and rough. Every time I told you to stay away, every time I warned you that being near me would put you in danger. And yet, here you are. The accusation stung, not because it was cruel but because it was true. I didn't choose this, I whispered, my voice cracking despite my best effort to hold it together. I didn't choose to get caught between your wars, your enemies. You're my world, he finished for me, his tone sharp but quiet. No, you didn't. But fate doesn't wait for permission. I froze, my breath hitching. Fate, that word again. The one that made my stomach twist and my heart race in ways I didn't understand. Why do you keep saying that? I asked, stepping closer despite myself. Why does it sound like you know something I don't? His jaw clenched, and for a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and unspoken. Then finally, he exhaled, his gaze softening as he looked past me to the glowing silver moon above. There are things about you, Ava, he said quietly, things you don't know. Things you can't know. Not yet. Frustration boiled beneath my skin, but before I could speak, he closed the distance between us completely, until the warmth of his body brushed against mine and the scent of his skin earth, cedar, and something darker wrapped around me. Every time I try to stay away, he murmured, his voice dropping to something dangerous and soft, my wolf fights me. Do you understand what that means? I shook my head, my breath trembling, though my voice came out in a whisper. No, it means, he said, his thumb grazing the edge of my jaw, his touch almost reverent, that you're not just someone. To me, you're not a passing thought, Ava. You're mine. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and raw, like a confession torn straight from his soul. I should have stepped back. I should have told him no, demanded the answers I deserved, before letting him close enough to blur the lines again. But instead, I stood there, frozen beneath the weight of his words, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it might shatter my ribs. Kieran, I breathed, barely managing to find my voice. You can't just say something like that and expect me to. Before I could finish, a distant howl cut through the forest, sharp and low, followed by another, and another. Kieran's head snapped up, his entire body tensing in an instant. The wildness in his eyes sharpened, something primal roaring awake beneath the surface. They found us, he muttered under his breath. Who? I asked, fear curling in my chest. He didn't answer, he just grabbed my hand, his grip firm and unyielding, pulling me into a run. The world blurred around us as we sprinted through the trees, my lungs burning, my thoughts spinning faster than I could process. Finally, we stopped in a small clearing, hidden beneath the canopy of pines. Kieran released my hand only to press a finger against my lips, signaling for silence. I heard them, then the faint crunch of footsteps, too many to count, circling us from every direction. They're rogues, he whispered, his voice a deadly calm I'd never heard before. And they won't stop until they've tasted blood. I stared at him, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the wind. Then what do we do? His gaze locked with mine, intense and unyielding, and for the first time since I met him, I saw the full truth of what he was: the alpha, the predator, the beast barely restrained beneath the man. Stay behind me, he growled, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the weight of command. No matter what happens, do not run. The shadows moved, the howls drew closer, and the night held its breath. And as Kieran stepped forward into the moonlight, his body shuddered, bones cracking and reshaping, claws slicing through the darkness. For the first time, I saw the beast, and I wasn't sure if I was terrified of him, or terrified of how much I wanted him. The forest was unnaturally quiet that night. Even the wind seemed hesitant, as though holding its breath in anticipation of something ancient and inevitable. The blood moon hung low in the sky, glowing like an open wound, its crimson light spilling across the towering pines and painting the forest floor in ghostly shades of scarlet. Arya stood at the edge of the clearing, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Her fingers trembled slightly as they clutched the hilt of the silver dagger Damien had given her, a weapon she had never imagined she'd need to hold, let alone use. Every nerve in her body screamed that she shouldn't be there, but her wolf stirred inside her chest, restless, insistent. Something was coming. Behind her, Damien stepped into the faint light, his expression carved from shadows and steel. His dark hair clung damply to his forehead, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made her heart skip. He had shifted only halfway, his canines sharp, his muscles taut, and his energy vibrating like a storm barely contained. They're close, he said, his voice low and gravelly, more wolf than man. The blood moon amplifies every instinct, every hunger. Tonight, no wolf is safe, not even me. Arya turned to face him, her voice quieter than she intended. Then why bring me here? If the packs are hunting, if you lose control, I won't lose control, Damien growled softly, stepping closer, his heat wrapping around her even in the cool night air. "Not with you here. But I had to show you this, Arya. I had to prepare you. Because after tonight, there's no turning back." The weight of his words pressed against her ribs, but she nodded, forcing strength into her voice. "Then tell me what I've been feeling since the night you saved me. Tell me why my heart knows you, why my dreams are filled with your shadow." Damien hesitated, his jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For days, he had been holding back the truth, fearing it, hating it, knowing that once he spoke, the words, their fates would be bound forever. Finally, his gaze locked with hers, unrelenting. "You're mine," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You've always been mine. The bond, the one you felt pulling you to me. It's real. You're my mate, Arya." Her breath caught, her mind spinning, her entire body trembling with a flood of emotions she couldn't name. Fear, longing, relief, anger. The connection between them pulls like a living thing, thrumming beneath her skin, undeniable and overwhelming. But before she could respond, a low, rumbling snarl ripped through the clearing. Damien spun instantly, his claws extending, his shoulders rising as his wolf surged forward. From the tree line, shadows began to move, sleek, powerful forms slipping silently between the trunks. Wolves, at least 6 of them, their eyes glowing faintly in the crimson haze. "Stay behind me," Damien ordered, his voice suddenly sharp, commanding. "Alpha." Arya's grip tightened on the dagger. "No, I can fight." He shot her a glare so fierce it sent shivers down her spine, but before he could argue, the first wolf lunged. Damien met it midair, claws flashing, their bodies colliding with bone-cracking force. Snarls, growls, and the sound of tearing flesh filled the night. Arya's instincts screamed at her to run, but something inside her, something primal and wild, refused to move. She couldn't leave him. Another wolf broke from the shadows, heading straight for her. Without thinking, she raised the dagger. Her hands shook violently, but when the creature leapt, she sidestepped and plunged the blade deep into its side. The wolf yelped, collapsing to the ground, and she stared at her blood-stained hands in shock. Damien roared behind her, his voice both wolf and man. "Arya." She turned just in time to see the largest wolf emerge from the shadows, black fur glistening, its body massive, its golden eyes burning with unnatural fury. But this wasn't just any wolf. This was the alpha of the rival pack,